All right, we are officially live. Hello, everybody. Joshua Hatton with ImpEx Beverages, kicking off this year with our first ImpEx Beverages Distillery deep dive. It's kind of interesting. We're kicking off this deep dive with, well, not necessarily something that's exactly a distillery, but yet a really incredible brand that we're now launching here in the States, and we'll talk about that shortly. Normally with me, I've got Sam Filmus and Chris Udy. But Chris is somewhere. He's gallivanting. So it's you and me, Sam, at the helm.
You can call me Chris, Joshua. I know you like this name anyways, so better. Hello, everyone.
How you doing, Sam?
Pretty good. How are you, Joshua? How
Yeah,
you're
I'm
still alive? I see.
I'm still alive. I feel better than ever. All right, let me bring on our guests here. Well, let's bring on. It's got to be ladies before gents,
Oh,
of course.
that's sweet.
Chanel Liquori, and I have, look at this. This is a proper introduction.
That's very long.
Isn't that, you've got a really long title. How do you fit that all into the one card?
We just shorten it to international sales manager, but I don't take care of the whole world. I take care of Asia Pacific and the US. So
Ah,
yeah.
well, really excited to have you on here and excited to bring in this gentleman as well, Mr. Oliver Chilton. How are you, sir?
Very good. I'm not in anywhere near as fun place as anyone else. So
Yeah, where are we calling in from? We've got, I'm in Connecticut. Sam, where are you calling in from?
I'm the best place in in the world, San Francisco.
And Ollie?
I am in Speyside.
That's right.
No,
Yeah,
no one knows whiskey. Everyone else has got more whiskey apart from Charles, who's got a swimming pool. So
And Chanel, where are you calling in from on this evening?
Kia ora koutou, everybody. I'm calling in from Tamaki Makaurau, also known as Auckland, New Zealand. I am calling from the future, so it's Thursday afternoon here.
That's amazing. No matter how much of this I drink, I don't know if I'll understand how any of that works.
It's really weird. The jet lag is real. It's a real thing that exists.
Well, for you, it's just the middle of the day. For Ollie, it's the middle of the night. So I think maybe it's best just to sort of hop right into it. And Sam, I know you've got some questions up your sleeve. I had an opening question, but if you had one that you thought would work out, I wouldn't mind passing it to you.
Go ahead with the opening question. Maybe that's the question I wanted to ask. So we'll kill two
Okay.
birds with one stone.
Perfect. So you're with Elixir Distillers, and Elixir Distillers has a good number of brands, and two of which we've been bringing in to the U.S. for a few years: Port Eskeg and Single Malt of Scotland. Two independent bottling brands, if you will. But there, since we started bringing in those brands each year, when we saw you, we said, "So when are we getting Elements of Islay? When's that going to happen?" And we knew there was a problem with the bottle size, right? They came in the 500 ml bottles, and that's still not a legal size for the U.S. But now we're 700 ml, and now we're talking in a time when we're launching Elements of Islay. It's here in the States, and it's hitting shelves, and it's hitting my glass. It's hitting our glasses, which is really cool. I would love it if the two of you could go through a bit of the history of the brand, because it's one that's really just as old, I think, as Single Malt of Scotland and Port Eskeg, right?
Well, Single Malt of Scotland was first by quite a large margin, right, Ollie?
yeah, so Single Malt of Scotland kind of dates back to 2002. and you know, it was the first label brand name that we had, I guess. If you don't include the random casks that we bottled for Whiskey Exchange, etc., before that. And Elements of Islay was second, so that's 2000 and launch was 2008. We get a bit confused because we started in 2006, but as you guys well know, we like to take our time. Some things just don't change. We are forever patient, or at least our customers are forever patient. It's probably a better way of looking at it. So yeah, 2008, I think it's official launch. And it was originally, it was supposed to be, it was a home for expressing different Islay styles and for removing preconceptions. It's probably a way to look at it.
Okay.
So one of, certainly one of Sekinda's things was that Islay whiskey was good, whether it was young or old, it didn't matter. It was a particularly special place because, and I think this is 100% true and true today as it was back then. Islay as a region, as an island that creates whiskey, is incredibly unique because the quantity of quality per square mile is insane. I mean, like just looking behind Sam, and the Kilhoman collection there is as good example as any.
Stunning, yeah, right.
You know, you will struggle if you wrote a list of top 20 distilleries. There's a good chance that currently 7 or 8 or 9 of them will come from Islay. Well, there's only 9 operating distilleries, so that kind of gives you an insight into how insane the quality is. And back in 2006-7, you could pick up Islay whiskey as young as 5 years old. You're talking about when stuff like Ardbeg, very young, was coming out, and it was outstanding. But you could also buy Islay whiskey at 30, 40 years old, which was outstanding. And Sekinda was keen to show that, but he was keen to show that it really didn't matter. It was just the liquid was good. That was the end of it. So Elements of Islay originally was supposed to be a vehicle for us to look at different distilleries, different flavor profiles on Islay, and show how they perform at different ages. We weren't going to share vintages or age statements or any class types. There was no information on the bottles, none, and that was intentional. The only thing you got on the bottle was letters that indicated the make. It was a really complicated series of letters.
But for whiskey dorks, it's perfect, right? It's that little, it's a code you can follow, and then you go to your friends and you say, you know, hey, Sven, that's a good name. You know, have you tried the new BN4? And you know, it was a thing.
Surprised how many people would get it wrong. Like the amount of conversations I had with people, like, yeah, I really like that brewery you bottled.
Sorry.
Which one was that? The BR. Oh, okay. That's the Platy. Okay. Well, that's CL from Klein Leash. And you sometimes be like, okay, but you know it's from Islay, right?
Josh Hatton, can I just say I've never heard it. I've heard whiskey geeks and I've heard whiskey nerds. I don't think I've ever come across whiskey dorks before.
Oh, have you not?
That was a new terminology for me.
Keep that one in the chamber, Chanel.
Okay.
You're gonna want to use it. Yep.
Duly noted, mate.
So yeah.
So that was what it was. And one of the other reasons, a couple of things that kind of came out of that, we had a lot of stock. We bought a big parcel of stock of Lagavulin, which we were not allowed to call Lagavulin for a name for that. So, you know, LG, nice and easy. LP. Originally, Sekinda also said he didn't want any of the letters to be actual chemicals but it is clear that he never studied chemistry. So we fell into small problems. Like he's like, none of them are actual chemical systems, chemical symbols. And I was like, well, apart from chlorine, bromine. I mean, basically, the list keeps going on. Not great when you look at it. And then he basically said he would have someone sign, like approve each batch. So we would send bottles off to the first person to approve them was Charlie McLean. So we sent Charlie bottles, and he put his signature to them and said these are good quality. And that was the idea, was that would be enough, right? It was all that mattered was we would put great whiskey in a bottle. We wouldn't give anyone any information. We'd sell it at a decent price. And if we built our reputation up, people would buy them regardless of what was in the bottle because they knew it would take. And we would start by just getting people to approve them. So we had some great people early on, and genuinely everyone was paid for their approvals in whiskey. So Charlie's payment, he did not take money. He took I think he had 2 bottles of each release that he approved, and that is what we used to do. Send him 2 bottles to say thank you for approving the whiskey. So it was him. We had Dominic Roscoe, R.I.P., and we had Ingvar Rond did some from Sweden. So it was quite nice. It was hard work, especially if you didn't know what you were doing, like me. Samples after approval. But it was also challenging to find the whiskey. And I mean, we were also bottling pretty silly stuff. So we would bottle 25-year-old Bruichladdich for 50 quid in a 50 cl.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're talking about another time entirely.
Yeah. And not tell people.
Yeah. Not tell people what it was.
Would they, if they called you up or sent you an email, would you let them know, or would you say, did you like it?
So to start with, we didn't really share anything, but then nobody was really asking. That might sound really odd, but you'd get people asking at shows, but that was it. Bear in mind, back then we probably sold most of the whiskey through our shop. So most of it was hand sold by us to our customers. We were in maybe half a dozen countries around the world. And most of our importers back then were our friends. So we still deal with the same people in most countries. So Belgium was the Nectar, and Mario and Jan had a similar company to us. They were our friends. They sold our whiskey. Hans and Alka, they're still our importers in the Netherlands. It was lots of like-minded people selling booze. Does that make sense? So it wasn't. I don't think it was like a thought-out strategy for sales. It was more just a bunch of friends selling whiskey, which is obviously different to today. We have to be professional today, or at least pretend to be.
Did a lot of the inception or the ideation for Elements of Islay come from the actual bottle itself?
There was also that. So the name and the label format, it all kind of fell into place because Sukhinder kept he needed this idea, and our designer today was the designer who did Elements of Islay, but he didn't work for us at the time. And he got sent a bottle called Pharmacia from a company in Italy, and it looked like a pharmacy bottle, and this took Sukhinder back to I go on about this quite a lot. Like in the 1920s in the States, the only whiskey that you guys could legally get from Scotland consistently was Ardbeg and Lefroy, because you could get a pharmacist, a doctor, to sign that off for you because it was medicine, right? So
yeah, for sure.
So he was quite obsessed with this idea that Islay whiskey is medicine. It's medicinal. It tastes like medicine, and it is good for you. And it should definitely go in a medical bottle. Don't quote me, by the way.
Yeah, we might need some sort of asterisk underneath this. None of the medical advice given by Ollie Chilton today.
Just a reminder, we're live. I can't edit any of this. So yes,
we've got time to do those long bits at the end of the adverts where it says, may cause blindness and death. But yeah,
So
that was how it kind of came together.
so it went from focusing a bit on distilleries with the the secret codes for distilleries, or maybe secret codes for specific distillates within
Mates.
certain distilleries as well. I know um, we got some into the States that was. Am I allowed to talk about it? Am I allowed to share it? There was LN2,
Two.
and that was Lockendal, which was a spirit specific to Bruichladdich. So, like that, this is what I'm talking about when I said that original idea of having the little code and letting the whiskey dorks, geeks, nerds, whatever, choose your words, Chanel. Yeah, there you go, Sam. Perfect. Uh,
Awesome.
it's incredibly geeky stuff. And I've always loved that about the brand. And one of the things that I thought was cool, and I don't know if I learned this late or if it came in later, but at one point you introduced a blended malt that was simply called peated. If I remember correctly, right? There was a
Peat.
blended malt that precedes what the new range is looking like.
Yeah, so that was Pete, and that was about
Peat,
2015, I think 2015 we did that. As you say, the funniest thing, you can find a table that was created in 2008, and it had not all, because other people made makes afterwards. It had a whole list of codes on it. The best one was MA, because we bought a whole stock of Margaret.
Whoa, hold on,
Whoa.
pause.
Whoa.
Let's talk about the malt mill.
That was the whole thing. We put it on there because we bought Margadale, and we were like, oh well,
Margadale.
that'll be MA. We hadn't thought about it. We just put it on this list of things, and then we released it into the world. And it happened to be about the same time we listed a bottle of malt mill on the Whiskey Exchange, which we actually just did for giggles. I mean, we had no intention of
Like an April Fool's thing or something?
No, not even. We did it late at night because we thought it was funny. It was a very different time. There was only about 30 of us, so it was kind of like you just did stuff because it was a really small in-joke for a very small number of people. Right? So,
Yeah, exactly.
and so we put MA and not really thinking about it, and then all we got for about 6 months was Swedish whiskey geeks phoning us up going, so how many casks of malt mill do you have? And we're like,
Serves you right.
What have we done? But yeah, Pete came in later because we were struggling around that time. Like, I mean, you guys know you go through ups and downs with cask buying, and times where it's easy and times where it's hard, right? There's the reality in the kind of early 2000s. You could buy as much whiskey as you like it was basically free. Certainly looking back, it feels like it was. And then about 2012, 13, we hit some really hard times with cask buying. The market just became really tight, and we became really aware that buying a range of Islay whiskies like we used to was getting tougher. You couldn't buy. You were suddenly finding it a lot harder to buy Ardbeg, and you were finding it harder to buy this big range of stuff. And we still had stock, right? But we were bottling, as I say, 25-year-old Bruichladdich and just releasing them, being like, is there a replacement for this? No. So we managed to get our hands on a big parcel of blended malt, which was essentially it was a Kalila Lagavulin blend.
Okay, sure.
And we created a blended malt, and the idea then was, okay, how can we give ourselves something that we can talk about every day, because we're running out of whiskey too quickly. We're selling really quickly. It's a good problem to have, I guess, but it felt frustrating. So we thought, I always think that it's a good explanation of our own development, certainly my development. We thought it was really easy blending. How hard can that be? We learned quickly that it's a lot more complicated than we thought. So we launched that, and we thought we would try and yeah, thank you. No idea.
Is that shade, Joshua?
So yeah, we launched that 2015, 2016. To give you some idea of what we didn't know, we launched with a 59.3% blended malt because we thought that was a good idea.
Oh, wow.
Turns out most customers are really scared of big numbers. Oh well.
Well, you live and learn. So it took you a while to sell through that. Did you ended up falling on a lower ABV? Did it switch to 46 at that point, or did you?
We actually went for 45. We ran
Okay.
trials to see how low we could take the alcohol because we wanted it to be used. Like, we wanted it to be more usable. We wanted it to be used in drinks and cocktails and that kind of thing. So we were trying to find ways to take the alcohol down sensibly.
Amazing, David Feldman.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Got another one from Michael Nolan here, who's been reaching out, looking forward to when this is coming to Illinois, and it's on its way, which is great.
That's awesome.
Mike had a chance to bring it before Illinois brings it. Michael, your samples are on the way.
Michael's a good friend on many levels. He's a good friend personally. He's a good friend to ImpEx. He's a good friend to Single Cask Nation. He's just a good friend in general.
Wow, flies around the world finding Glenbergie, basically. That's
there you go.
You and me both. Love that stuff. Delicious.
So we're transitioning a little bit here. We talked a little bit about the history, a little transition into the blended malts, and then you switched over to 700 mLs, and initially for ImpEx we brought in a BN10, which Bunnahabhain. 10 being your 10th release, right? It wasn't a 10-year-old. It was just the 10th Bunnahabhain you did.
Yeah, because we wanted to use people with that. Yeah.
And then the LN2, and now we have. Well, I've got two of the three bottlings that are coming to the U.S. So I've got the Cask Edit, which you can see I've enjoyed. I've also shared, by the way. I'm not drinking that much. And then I've got the sherry cask as well. But then you've got the third one, which is the bourbon. I wonder if you can go over some of the details of these three bottlings, because this is, like you had said about peat and being something that's regularly available, something you can always talk about. That's what these will be like, correct?
Yeah. So we kind of took I think it's fair to say we took our learnings from Pete. We took our learnings in terms of blending. There's a little bit of ego in all of these, so you do bear that in mind. I'm going to apologize profusely. But basically, I thought we might know a little bit more about what we were doing. I could be wrong. And there's also, for me, Elements of Islay is it's our first foray into what we want to do on Islay at Port and Trewin, if that makes sense. So there's a link in terms of where we've been and where we're going. Because the more time we've spent as an independent bottler and as a bottler of kind of bigger batch stuff, the more interested we've become in flavor creation, and that encouraged us to build a distillery, which we're doing, and there is giant pylons currently piling into the ground on Islay. Well, not right now because it's pouring down with rain, and it's really cold, but there will be tomorrow. And a big part of that was how do we create flavor, and we took Elements of Islay as our opportunity to do that. So we've taken all of our bits of learning from being an independent bottler and buying different spirits and understanding the spirits, all of our understanding from what we've been filling into and recasking into over the last 10 years. And then brought in our messing around with blending and lots of the brilliant people who've joined our company in the last 5-6 years particularly. And we tried to kind of reimagine what that would be in terms of Elements of Islay. So we've got Cask Edit, which is it's a simple blend from a spirit point of view. It's Kalila and Liquori essentially. In fact, all three are the same two spirits. But then what we've got is the Kalila in this is all refill American oak. It's fresh, clean, light. And then we used some first fill bourbon barrels of Liquori, some fill sherry butts, and some first fill sherry hogsheads. And very much the whole idea, and it was very, from a liquid point of view, it was personal for me. I wanted to make something that was bigger than what we'd had before, that was richer than peat. It was more, excuse the horrible marketing pun, elemental. It felt bigger, but it also had to be sweeter, because one of the things that we wanted for Elements of Islay back in 2015-16 was that we wanted it to be mixable. We're very lucky. We've got great people in our company like Chanel who know a lot more about mixing stuff than I do. And so I could deliver samples in the middle of COVID to her door.
Yeah.
Can you make drinks with this one?
I painstakingly tried through a few samples in highballs, guys. You are so welcome.
The hard work,
I
Chanel.
am.
It's the hard work.
I know.
So it was an opportunity to try and think of, and I know I've probably said this before on a chat with you guys, and it's definitely become my big drum. It's our first real foray into what I would call intentional whiskey. So you're casking stuff and using stuff with an intention to make it taste a particular way and to make it for a purpose. And as I say, for me, that reaches into the future as well, because, from a distilling point of view, Port and Trewin is being designed to intentionally make whiskey. It's not by chance. We want flavor profiles, and we want to create ingredients to work with to make something that people want to drink, to make something that's really enjoyable. And that's where I think, for me, Elements of Islay really sits. The other two in the range, I guess, that's a little bit more back in the past than it is in the future. And a bit of our learnings as we went along.
I think Elements is a really cool, if you guys know our other brands, it's a really amazing evolvement of, Ollie's going to hate this, of Ollie learning, right? You look at something like Single Malts of Scotland, typically it's the single casks. You're tasting through casks and going, what sits well on its own, what's beautiful and sings by itself. And then you look at Portiskeag, that is single malt. So you're still dealing with the same distillery, but you're putting together, you're batching together different casks of the same distillery to make it a whole. And then this is far more experimental. I mean, more along the lines of what he was doing with Black Tot in terms of different distilleries and making a whole out of that, and thinking about what you want in that bottle and making it sing. It's pretty incredible to see that evolvement, I think.
I love that. And Sam, you and I were talking a bit earlier.
No.
Oh no.
Oh no. Sam.
What were you guys talking about, Sam? What were you guys talking about?
Wow,
I might come up with a different story, so I'll just wait for him to come back. That's why he's still alive. Tell us, because I need to know too.
I'm afraid to bring it up again. I think my system may reject it all over again.
And that's not what you were going to say 3 seconds ago, right? Go for it, Joshua.
Well, we were talking about blending and process, and I wanted to hand it over to you because I thought the way you thought about it was cool. The way you constructed the question was interesting. So I'd love to hand it to you.
Sure. Well, I'm going to start with a statement and then followed with a question. So obviously, we're talking about Elements of Islay starting as a single malt, and now we're talking about blended malt, which is very exciting to us. Like exciting. We at ImpEx we're challenging people. We'd like to challenge. I came across blended malt at that time. It was called pure malt when I was getting the signatory line. That was Huck's Head, I believe. It was a mixture of Lagavulin and Linkwood, Speyside, and then at the same time, John Glazer came with his concept of compass box, which was very, very intriguing and interesting. And I'm glad that I met Robinson. He was ambassadoring the compass box at that time. That was 2003, 2002, something like that. And then we, Big Pete, and then Glenallachie came with McNair's blended malt. So we're very excited about Elements of Islay because I think it will take us and the category, and we're totally 100% behind this category to promote it and to spell it to people who are saying, blended, so. Because I think, and I'm the first who said that, but I think I heard that from John Hansel first when he said, this distillery is great, or this cask, or this batch is great. This batch is great from another distillery, but putting them together, it's even better. That's a symphony. That's something that takes the taste and the quality and to the next level. And with Elixir Distillers having this access to a lot of distilleries on Islay and to a lot of casks, and with all this palette, and now looks like Chanel is kind of part of this decision-making blending process, I'm sure we're going to be, taking it to the next level. So that's my statement. Now my question is, Oli, where is my Lagavulin? Oops, no, not this one. So,
oh, that was the sherry cat, the 24-year-old sherry cask one, right? That
thank
one?
you, Jessica. Because if it was 21 and bourbon, we would pass on it. But 24,
No, it should be 24 and sherry.
that's something that.
Oh, so good.
When you guys go through the selection process first, before even you vet or marry these two distilleries that you named before that I'm not allowed to name, what is the criteria you're going by when you select those casks?
So I guess there's two stages to that. So if you're talking about the creation of the initial blend, so you have I have a bench sample, right, that I'm creating, and that's what I'm working from, and then I create a recipe. And then the really boring answer is that when we have a general recipe of amount of spirit we're going to use in our blend, and each time we pull a bottling forward, so we might run 3,000 cases, 5,000 cases at a time, right? We'll pull enough casks in the ratios that we've defined, and Andrew, who's my assistant blender, or myself, in fact it's me because it's this Friday we're doing the next run, goes and checks all the casks. So we walk down the casks, we check the casks, and all we're looking for is, do they fit the profile that we have on my piece of paper? This is what this is supposed to taste like. And then we put those together, and then we get a VAT sample, and we check the VAT sample and make sure that it tastes like it did before. That's probably not your question, Sam, but that's kind of what we do day to day. In terms of the initial blend and the creation of the recipe, without wanting to sound really arty and arsey and like I studied philosophy at university, which I did, it's not for me, and it is personal. Right? I know that every blender / person who works with whiskey / distiller they work differently, right? But for me, I start with a general concept, like these are the points I'd like to meet. Sometimes that's dictated from Secunda. Sometimes it's dictated from a marketing idea. like we're about to launch a limited edition for Elements of Islay called Beach Bonfire, and that came from a kind of a marketing concept, which made me angry and resulted in me taking things to probably a stage it probably didn't need to go to in terms of philosophy. But Chanel knows, because she watched me get angry in the office.
It's great fun. I sit next to him in the office. It's
essentially it becomes a little bit of an internal journey for me. And then you're looking at the styles. So what I do is I think in terms of, okay, I want like, if I take Cask as an example, I want it to be phenolic, right? So I know it needs to be Islay in the sense of what a lot of people perceive as Islay. And that's not the same thing to say that's what I think Islay is, because that's a slightly different conversation. But people perceive Islay to be phenolic in that kind of medicinal sense. They think of Liquori 10-year-old. They think of bandages and, you know, wet dog and all of that stuff. So Elements of Islay, for me, if I'm thinking about it that way, I want it to have that. But then I think of Islay slightly differently. So Islay whiskey for me is all about elegance and fruit, because that's what I love about it. I think that's what's so expressive about the island. And again, going back to your background, Sam, you think about a whiskey like Kilchoman. It's not massively phenolic in the sense of bandages, but it is intensely fruity, right? It's a fruity spirit. And I want, for something that we bottle, I want to be able to express that. And then when I was writing my list of things for Cask Edit, I wanted it to have sweetness. So you start thinking, okay, well, what kind of wood is going to deliver that? First of all, bourbon, it will give me those vanillins. It will give me, with Liquori, it will particularly express stuff like banana, right? You get these flavors of banana. And then I start looking at the kind of sherry elements and what's that going to give, and the length, the gravitas. Is it going to sit well on the palate? What kind of length am I looking for? So all I'm doing is it's very up in the air, arty-farty. I think these things will work. And then I go get samples of those things and I mix them together. And 99% the first time I do it, it's wrong. And then you just go up and downy. It's really touchy-feely. I used to think that
uppy
because I was really bad at my
uppy. You can all write that down.
As
yeah,
okay. Uppy downy. Okay.
Yeah. When you do your DCD with the IBD, yeah, that comes up in the exam. I promise you, absolutely. Qualified distiller me, I can tell you. But I used to think, I genuinely used to think that was because I was. I used to think it was because I was really bad at my job. Because I used to think that when you do, like Chanel was saying, when you do single cask selection, at the end of the day, that's really easy. You try it, it tastes good, or it doesn't. Mm-hmm. And you know, you can go on to the nuance as much as you like, but it's a yes or a no. We're putting in a bowl, we're not putting in a bowl. Those are your two states. Whereas blending is by its nature, you're looking for the nuance. You're trying to find where does this work and how much of it works. And I used to think that it took me a long time to come to a conclusion or get to the end was a sign that I was bad at it. And then one day, for Skinner's birthday, we had a really lovely day with Jim Beverage, former master blender for Johnny Walker. And we spent the day going uppy downy, basically. And I asked him afterwards, I was like, is this normal? He's like, yeah, that's pretty much what you do.
Wow.
And the thing I remember vividly, because he got out a set of scales and he plugged it into the laptop and it was linked to a spreadsheet and he could type in any cask number and it had all the records and then he could blend on the set of scales and it came up with all the data. And I was like, that's interesting. And then he was like, yeah, that's exactly the same as you with a measuring device and a hydrometer. And I was like, oh, it's not as amazing as I thought it was. I mean, it just makes you look more professional than me. And I was really lucky. I saw Jim a couple of weeks ago. We launched a new product range and he came along and he's retired now. and we were chatting about that day, and he's like, yeah, that is genuinely what blending is. It's lots of tasting, trial, error, lots of cerebral thinking, and then trying to make things work. And 90% of the time, the first time you do it, is not, because the reactions are not what you think they're going to be. And I guess you get, I hope, touch wood, you get better the longer you do it, and it gets easier. But that's not what was suggested to me by Jim Beveridge. Apparently, I'm still going to be uppy downy in about 30 years, 40 years time.
I think one of the things that I've really learned from you from this range in particular, and it's probably is, usually I think in my head, as long as all of the sum of the parts taste good, it's all going to come together and taste good. But actually, sometimes that just creates good whiskey. It has a whole, as a whole, it's good, it's fine. But what you've done with especially those sherry hogsheads, you've created something that's probably not that great on its own, but a little bit of it, like bitters in an old fashioned, elevates it, creates little spikes that are interesting. And that's what makes people go back for more, is that interesting bit. If you've ever tasted bitters on its own, it ain't great, but in an old fashioned, it's necessary, And I think that's something that you've brought into this that you haven't had to do before with the other stuff, with the other sort of batches that you've done.
That's cool.
He doesn't like me talking good about him. I'll be honest, he's probably feeling very uncomfortable. But here we are.
I mean, so if you look at something, those sherry hogsheads are a great example, because we originally used to bottle those. We do like either under Whiskey Trail, or we did a few batches of Elements of Islay, which we used to call peat and sherry. And the only country that consistently took those sherry hogsheads was Germany, because they were seriously dark, very bitter, dank. Yeah, they basically
a little sulfury.
Yeah, like meat, but they work. As Chanel says, we only use, I think it's 4% in cask edit and about 5%, or it's probably the other way around. My memory's terrible. In sherry cask, but what it does is it creates length. Right, so it just carries flavor for you. So when you're tasting it, what you'll find is that the spices linger because of the bitterness that you've delivered from those sherry hogsheads. So you don't need much to give you that. And we kind of learned that in rum, to be fair. I mean, we learned that in rum quite quickly.
So with this, the sherry cask, how much sherry's in there? How much sherry cask matured is in there?
Everything in there is being matured in the next sherry cask. So the
okay.
The Kalia is the Kalia. So this is where
what you were referring to was the amount of sherry cask being used for cask edit, and all you needed was
the sherry hogsheads. So the sherry butts, and sherry hogsheads.
Gotcha. Now I got it. Yeah.
Of Lefroy.
So conversations like we're doing tonight are really good, because when you do the brand stuff, like, and you sit with the lovely people from marketing, and they say, right, so everything like in bourbon cask is matured in a bourbon barrel. And I'm like, well, not exactly. I mean, it's a ratio of this, and then there's this, and this is, I mean, this was a bourbon barrel, but it's been remade into this, and then so you're going through all of the minute detail of what you're doing to make it taste the way you want it to. And they're like, can I call it bourbon cask? And you're like, well, if you want to. I don't think that's a full description of what I've done. Okay. Because they want, quite rightly, they want a short name on a label, and they want something that everyone walking to a shop understands. And you get that. From a making point of view, you're kind of like, well, you're really just doing my work down a bit. And so, like, sherry cask is a great example, because it's a mixture of just about half or just under half Kalila, all refill sherry butts. So these are all first fill, and so a bit lighter. They're quite musty. They've got this dank earth floor flavor thing, and then you've got first fill Oloroso sherry butts of Lefroy, and they're from Miguel Martin, so they're all chocolate and ginger and rich and like heady. And then you've got those sherry hogsheads that Chanel was talking about, which also come from Miguel, but they have a slightly heavier toasting on them, and that basically gives you extra extraction. It makes it very dark, but you get all that wood character coming through that helps you create that bitterness that carries the rest of those flavors.
That's great. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you, when you're blending for Elements of Islay versus blending for Port Escague, do you have to think about it differently? Do you enjoy one over the other? Is blending whiskey from two different distilleries a bit more challenging? I realize I've thrown 3 questions at you at one time, so feel free to answer them in any order that you want.
It's not more challenging. It's not more challenging. It's the same job, right? At the end of the day, you're mixing stuff together. You're just pouring stuff. Like it's that my wrists work either which way. But the earlier question. So, do you think about it differently? 100%, because you've got to get yourself into a mindset of the thing you're trying to make. So, Elements of Islay for me, and this is where I view it, is it should be bigger, it should be more expressive, it should be like the island, right? There's lots of elements of Islay that is elegant, and my God, I did that. It was terrible. Chanel, don't judge me. I can see you shaking your head. There's lots of there's lots of bits of it that are elegant, like Port Escague. You know, that's standing on that hilltop, and it feels soft. Like that sounds stupid, but it feels like the moth under your feet, right? But then most of the time on Islay, and I don't know about you've all been multiple times. The thing about Islay is it is wild. Everything from the people to the weather to everything about it is extremes, because you're on the edge of the usable universe, right? You're on the west coast of Scotland. You're about to fall into the sea. If Ireland wasn't there, right, until we reach you guys, basically. So, and I genuinely think Ireland, at its best, when it's raw, it feels big. It feels a lot bigger than a 26-mile island. And so for me, Elements of Islay should feel big. And I think of the whiskies in that way. I like to think of them as being an expression of that size of the size of the personality of the place. Does that make sense? I spent the day with Georgie Crawford, and so you want an example of big character from Islay. That's Georgie, and I guess in some ways Elements of Islay is more Georgie, whereas Port Escague is not. Does that? So you kind of try and change your mindset.
I totally get what you're saying. I'm gonna say a thing, and then I'm gonna ask a question, and then I want to hand it over to Sam after that. The thing I'm gonna say, your face is gonna go red because it's gonna be a compliment. I don't apologize. I'm gonna compliment you anyway. Yeah, I honestly feel that with these whiskeys, you've captured that feeling of being on Islay. There is something so specific when you talked about, you've been on Islay, you've been there multiple times. There's a feeling, there's a smell, there's something about it that you can't really explain, but you can understand through whiskey, right? And I think that you've really nailed it. So my hat's off. If I were wearing a hat, I would take it off to you. So that's my compliment. Now my question: do you find it's almost the same question as before, but I'm changing the focus of it. Do you find that with Port Escague, you're staying true to the distillate But with Elements of Islay, you're allowed to be a bit more expressive simply because you're entering into a territory where you're taking two flavors to create whatever recipe you want it to be. So do you look at it that way? Does it feel that way? Or is it just, I'm blending this now, and now I'm blending this?
I wouldn't say I'm staying true to a distillate
Okay.
because we've used multiple distillates in the past. I think it's the difference is, and again, this is for me, right? This isn't. There certainly isn't what's in our marketing line that we should probably change because it's not how I think of it. But and I'm selfish and it's all about me. The I guess I see it that Portuskeg is an expression of liquid. Does that make sense? So I was in a place. So in some ways, that's saying the same thing as you. But what I mean by that is that Islay does create very elegant whiskies and historically has done so. Sometimes I feel like there's a reason to bottle Portuskeg because it's not celebrated. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I try to think of those whiskies in that light. And I think the aim, like I will specifically be tasting stuff and going, well, that's where this fits. It fits in with Portuskeg because it's elegant, it's pretty, and it's a slightly different feel. Elements of Islay for me is much more. It's more about creating a scenescape in my mind. So the one we're about to launch, and I know made fun of it, but so I was given the brief of, I think originally the brief was just fire, to which I laughed maniacally and got angry. But then all I could think about was, what is fire on Islay? And all I could think was sitting on, in my head, I was on Macchia Bay. I wasn't ever going to do the launch, but I was on Macchia Bay and we had a beach bonfire, and I could feel like you guys both know you've been there. When you're on Macchia Bay, you've got behind you, you've got the
brush.
It's like it's you've got lots of wildflowers, that kind of thing, and it feels you can almost smell that. So you've got the sea and you've got the sand, and that created for me an image. So I then had an image in my head of the colours that went with that. And you've got the reds and you've got the golds, and then you've got the dark sky, which on Islay, like to be fair, like in Speyside, it's huge. The sky is huge. Obviously sounds mental, but it is bigger, right? There's more colour to it. It feels alive. And so I started designing a whiskey based on those colours and what that felt to me. And then you start designing that in terms of flavours. So we ended up looking at things like, I was thinking about what is red, and red is cherries. And then I start thinking about drinks I like. So I was thinking of that very tacky drink of blood and sand. And I was literally had that in my head going, these are the flavors I'm thinking. I'm thinking that bitter vermouth, which is my herbal. That's my background, right? That's all of the scenery behind me. And then I've got the cherries and everything else. And I was looking specifically at whiskies that tasted like that. So we had some Bunnahabhain and Cherry Hoggies that literally tasted like vermouth. And we had some Lila and PX that had this big kind of cherry, but it was darker, it was richer, and that was my night sky. And then I had, I actually used Cask and bourbon as my base, and that's my sand. And I was literally building it that way. And that, for me, Elements of Islay, it gives you the ability to do that.
Yeah.
So your question, is that more enjoyable? Yes, because I love poetry. I love all this stuff. That's my happy place. But I love, to the same degree, I love the philosophy that goes with something like Portuskeg and the expression of liquid. I love the argument that goes with, this is what could be created here, and this is not what you expect. And going back to your point, Sam, sometimes the thing is to do the things that people don't expect and to show people the differences. I find those are my kind of really happy things to do. So basically, I'm very lucky. I just get to do what I like.
Except when marketing tell him to do something.
Well, even
and then he cracks the shits.
Yeah, but look what he did. They said create something
Yeah.
with fire, and then he created poetry through
Scenescape,
Macker Bay,
yeah.
and just amazing.
If you guys haven't worked out yet, those who have tuned in, Ollie has a touch of the synesthesia, I feel. So
I think so.
It's pretty cool. Tasting notes sometimes are a little hard. Tastes purple, and you're like, thanks, Ollie. That's
I was
really
just
helpful
saying
to
that. This tastes like purple. I was just
Yeah.
thinking that. Oh my gosh.
me.
Sam, you had another question?
Sure. Just following up what I liked a lot when Ali's saying that he's trying to show the character Violet through the blend that he creates, or you both create. I started with the Cask edit, and now I'm at bourbon, and it really shows how bold the whiskey is. At the same time, it's so velvety and it's so sweet and it's so easy to drink. Even at this strength, it's just so, yeah, I agree with Joshua on this, which doesn't happen too often, that we take our hats. So that's why his name is Hatton, Mr. Hatton. We take our hats off for this. Question I have. So while we have these three as a core expressions, regular expressions, I know you mentioned the Figeal limited release. Are there any limited releases in the pipeline? I don't know. You will probably hate this question. Age statements or anything that.
Age statements, not specifically. No, I mean, are we not like, so to give you an idea, so the ages in the whiskies that we've got just launched in the States, they range from, well, the Kalila is somewhere between 7 and 8 mainly, although in sherry it's actually a lot older than that. I completely screwed that up from an age point of view. The youngest whiskey in sherry is 2011, so what's 12 years old.
Oh wow!
So yeah, we could put an age statement on that. It would look rather fancy, wouldn't it? But it's not important. From my point of view, it's not something I'm worried about. I'm not worried about how old or young stuff is in Elements of Islay, and that was certainly where that goes right back to the beginning of the brand. It's not important for what we're doing. It's about flavor, not age. That doesn't mean that I don't understand the importance of age to consumers, or that I don't understand the importance of age on a bottle. Like, we have other brands that we express that through. It's just not the story here. It's not the focus for us.
It's never been part of the DNA, right? Like it's never been, and that was the point of the inception of the creation of Elements.
In terms of limited edition, so we're doing the official release. There is an allocation. So we're doing two. We're doing one that's specially for Islay, which will be at a higher strength, and there's a small quantity that's just going to Islay. It's being sold through one shop, which is a local shop on Islay, and part of the money goes to charity. And it's like, it was quite important to us as people who are, we're relatively new from a point of view of distillation. When we're not distilling yet, but we're building. So we're new to the community, even though our distillery manager is obviously from there. We want to do things the right way. So if someone travels all the way to Islay to buy a bottle, that should be the only place they could buy that bottle. That's quite important. So certainly as a customer, it always annoys the hell out of me if I traveled to a place and I could have bought it at home. But that being said, we also wanted to have some for the rest of the world. So we're going to do a lower strength version that will be globally released. So you guys will get some, and it will be available later in the year. And we'll probably look at doing something similar every year. The great thing from a personal point of view is there's no brief. Like, I don't have to do a 12-year-old, or I don't have to do a cask strength, or I don't have to do, it could be anything. So it could be that marketing rock up with a new word that winds me up to the point where or it could be that I happen to be doing some messing around, when someone's in the office and go, actually, this tastes really good. Maybe we should make it into a product. And that'll be next year's release. So we'll do something like that every year. So there's always something to talk about. And there's always, the great thing with Elements of Islay is so flexible. So there's always opportunities to mess around. We always overblend, so we always make too much whiskey and we recask some of it. So we've always got spare casks of sherry sitting there and spare casks of bourbon sitting there that we might use as specials for customers. But you just don't know. We wanted to keep it that way.
Amazing.
At least it's a hope, and it's great. So sherry and bourbon are bottled at 54.5. The cask edit at 46. What happened to your 45.8 favorite?
45.8 refers to 80 imperial proof. So it's very much a traditional strength. And Elements of Islay isn't traditional. I mean, you could argue that maybe we shouldn't do 46. Maybe we should do a wacky strength like 47. But to be fair, it just became a little bit of a game of what could I put into a bottle that wouldn't go cloudy, right? So that's basically the game you're playing. And that's what that is important any which way you look at it. People won't buy cloudy whiskey. I think we'll change some things, but we won't change that.
Sounds like your ABV is a little uppy downy, and I think Greg Shores would agree. All just the old uppy downy.
Greg actually went all the way across town in LA to pick up his samples. So Greg, thank you very much.
Amazing.
Oh, nice. So some things came in, some questions and some comments that I wanted to read. Mark Lambert here. Curious, and any chance this will come to Brazil?
Oh, that's a good question. Well,
Chanel?
Watch this space, Mr. Lambert. We will see. Yeah. It's looking, it's getting there. We're getting there. We do have some conversations going. So,
and then there was two interesting comments that came in that I think are both valid, but are also opposing at the same time. Which, right? Because you can think about the same thing in different ways, and they can both be right. And so, the first one is from Chris. And Chris, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce your last name. I do apologize, but he says, I think the focus of flavor without an age statement is a good approach to blending whiskey, and I agree. I think it took single malt whiskey drinkers a bit to get used to the idea of non-age stated whiskeys, and now everybody's doing non-age stated whiskeys, and people are warming up to it more, which I think is nice. And then this man, a thinking man, says he likes the statements no matter the age because it gives a level of transparency. And I think, like Ali, you had mentioned you had touched on black tot earlier, and this idea of blending black tot, and that's where like Elixir Distillers as a company seems to focus quite a lot on transparency. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and how you deal with transparency with your liquid.
So in terms of certainly for Elements of Islay, if you phoned up the office and you asked Chanel what was in the bottles, we would tell you. I mean, to the extent that I'm quite happy to tell people exactly what cask went into each lot numbers if you're sad enough to look on the bottle. But not, I can say that because I'm that sad, so it's okay.
I think all four of us are that sad.
I think, look, this is a wonderful argument. The problem with Scotch is very simple. Our rules do not allow us to be transparent. They allow us to say what the youngest thing in the bottle is. And that is not the same thing, right? And I'm very much with John Glazer on this. If what should happen is you should be allowed to say what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You should be, and if you look at our rum labels, we put the youngest and we put the oldest, and we tell you everything. We put the entire recipe on the back of the label. You can go to our website, you can look it all up.
That's perfect. That answers Chris's other question there. So,
yeah, I mean, I think publishing recipes on a website is fine. The only other thing I would say, and this is where it becomes a little bit more tricky, and I think Compass Box do exactly the same if you actually look at their website. we're a small business, relatively speaking, so our batches aren't huge when we bottle them, right? We'll do 3,000 cases at a time. We might run them more regularly. Yeah. We might change this year depending on how, because we've now got a massive site next door to me that I can do bigger batches in. But what it means is that the youngest whiskey in the batch that I'm doing on Friday might be different to the batch that we did at the end of last year, right? And also even the percentage on casks. I get asked on the percentages on casks pretty much every meeting I go to. And I can give you my recipe, which is my starting point. Like Sam was asking, what do you do? I create a recipe, but then Andrew and I adjust that recipe on every batch, every single batch. It's exactly the same as cooking. Okay, so every time you read a recipe when you're cooking and it asks for spices or herbs, something you should bear in mind is each time you pour a jar of spice or herbs, it's different every time. I guarantee you it is different because anytime you're working with a natural ingredient, like, whether it's meat or veg or herbs or whatever, it's changing with the environment that it's being grown in, brought up in, whatever. And if you're a really good cook or a really good chef or whatever, you're adjusting for those things. So your recipe is this is what you should do. And then what you should be doing is as you go through it, you adjust up and down. You might need a bit more salt or a bit less. We do that on every single batch. We have to do that on every single batch. And what that means is my recipe is a guideline. It's not actually what goes into your bottle. So that's when the whole transparency thing for whiskey and, for some degree for rum becomes a little bit more tricky, right? So MBR on like Master Blend Reserve for Black Tie is different. It's one set recipe because we just do it once. That's it. That's the blend. I can tell you, made it, released it, it sold out. That's how it goes. With this, we're trying to create a whiskey that's always the same, so you can always go back and buy another bottle, and it tastes hopefully as similar as possible. But that does not mean that it has exactly the same ratios. It does not mean the ages are exactly the same every time. In fact, it's quite the opposite, because if I did that, it would taste different. So if it might sound counterintuitive, but if I put exactly the same type of casks at exactly the same ages in each time, and that was what I did, it would taste different. Whereas what we do is, and what any blending company does, is you adjust your ratios and your recipe to try and make it taste closer. And so when it comes to transparency, the question then becomes, well, how do you, I can't put that on the back of a label because I'd have to print a different label every time. Then we get into the fact, is it a limited edition? Are we buying these as collectibles? Well, we don't want that, because we want people to actually drink our whiskey. We're not, flipping bottles in auctions is for other people. Do we put it on the website? Do we adjust it on the website every time? How does the customer know that the bottle they bought from, Binny's last week is the same bottle I'm referring to on my website? So what you end up doing is you give generalizations, and we'll give generalizations of our recipe. This is what we do. Like, this is our general recipe, which is what most companies who release recipes do. They give you a generalization on specifics.
Sure.
And then when it comes to age statements, again, you give generalizations. I'll say, well, we're using, in the main 10, 12-year-old whiskey at this and 7, 8-year-old whiskey at this. But it might go up and it might go down depending on our stock holding and depending on how the casks fell and what things tasted like.
Yeah, it's so funny you bring up this point. Obviously I'm wearing my ImpEx hat, and I'm thinking at all times the various suppliers that come in, and I'll be with them, and we're doing an event, and we're talking about the makeup of this whiskey or the makeup of that whiskey. And when the supplier leaves, I remember all of the information that they had, and they said, okay, that whiskey had 5, 6, up to 7 years old whiskey in there. And I say, okay, that's the recipe, and that's the story that I tell. And then they come back to my market, and their answer has changed completely. Because if they kept with the same recipe, the flavor profile would shift. You've got to take into account the variability of flavors from cask to cask to retain this
Absolutely.
consistency.
If we were to take the back label from MBR 2021 and recreate it, it wouldn't taste the same. Right? It you know, you take that exact recipe, and we might even still have those, you know, but it's just not gonna, it's never gonna come out the same.
Look, this is going to sound. I often find, and I think this is true for lots of elements of whiskey production, right? And in fact, I've been having this conversation pretty much all week about distillation as well as cask, like cask types and what you fill. Everybody wants a silver bullet. They want, this is how we made it taste like this. And this is the answer. But we're not dealing with something, we're not dealing with a fixed thing. We're dealing with something that is from the very barley, the yeast, the water, all the way through to the production, like the temperature in the distillery and how that's adjusting, to the wood and how it's growing, how old it is, how it's seasoned, how it's changed. All of these tiny things have an impact on flavor. There is no silver bullet. The job of the, you know, I think people make whiskey, right? And the job of the people who make whiskey is to try and make it as well with all of these changing conditions as they possibly can. Writing that on the back of a label or putting it on a website is probably not what people want to hear. The uppy downy, right? People don't want to hear, well, I just do things that goes up and downy. That's not, that is not a silver bullet. That is not easy to describe to someone else. Up and down. But, and this is where it comes back to transparency, I would much rather just be honest with people and say, this is how it is. It's not easy, right? It's not a story. You can clean it up, right? You can simplify it for people, and that's fine. But let's never lie to them and say that's the answer, because that's wrong. You know, that's why conversations like this are quite good, because we can literally talk about all of those things, and we can say it's not simple.
Well, right, and that's the thing, you have to, because the answer is both not static and not simple, right? So we had another question come in, and then I know, Sam, you've got one more question in the chamber. But this is one from RJ Czar, who joined a bit late. They got a bottle of Elements of Islay OC6. They're curious to know what's in OC6. I've got a guess, but
OC6 is Octomore. I believe it was actually a mixture, because we bought. Is that one of the ones that's signed by Mark Rainey? I can't remember.
Let me see.
We bought a load of casks of Octomore from Mark because he needed to pay his school fees. Apparently the Remy money didn't go far enough.
Oh my God.
He's not listening to this, so it's fine. It's not like, you know.
he's got ears everywhere, Ollie. No, I'm joking.
He's too busy trying to convince people that barley is really important.
OC6 was you, my friend.
No, it was me. Yeah. So it will be a mixture of some casks we had. We had some Sauterne in there from memory.
The Octomore Sauterne. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a blend, because we had a few bits we had of Octomore. Before anyone asked, I don't know the phenol levels. We did not get that for the cask. And I'll be honest, I didn't care. I just...
Right.
I mean...
Did it taste good in the end? That's what's most important. There you go.
It often makes me laugh. We used to get questions. You guys will get this all the time. We used to get questions, particularly from when we used to own Whiskey Exchange, from the wholesale team, and they'd be like, "Could you tell me something about the cask?" I'd be like, "Okay, yeah, it was like whatever we'd sold, refill hogshead, distilled in 2006 from Kaliva." And you're like, okay, could you tell me some more? Like, it was stored in a warehouse, probably not far from Glasgow. And they were like, no, I need more. Like, which bit more would you like? Phenol levels? Oh, okay. Well, phenol levels. Yeah, Galina's probably what, 38-ish, maybe. Up and down. Goes up
It's
and
uppy
down.
downy. It's all uppy downy. Yeah.
Uppy downy. And then by the time it gets through production, what it actually, what's left.
There you go. There's another answer.
RJ, one of the coolest things about this Auchentoshan though is the Auchentoshan? No,
Oh my
Octomore.
gosh,
Sorry.
no.
Sorry. Got it in my head.
Talk about ends of the spectrum there.
One of the cool things about this Octomore is it's actually the last Octomore we bottled under Elements of Islay, which is quite cool. OC6.
Yeah, that's useful. That's useful.
Yeah. It looked like it yielded 870 odd bottles, but yeah, it's only that's the last one. All right.
Sounds like RJ is giving it a really nice review, and Octomore and Sauternes is one of my favorite things in the world. So now I have a new bottle to seek out. So, listen, we've got about 14 minutes left here. There was one last question here that came in that I wanted to clarify. I can't tell if they're asking a serious question or being cheeky, and so we'll find out. And this came from Martin Felder, and he said, "So did I hear?" Here we go. I'll just put it up. That way I don't have to write it or read it. Elements of Islay releases are all 12 years and up. Just to clarify, that is not correct. Correct?
So Cask get it. The Kalila in there is, at the moment, I could look at the back of the moving, but I think it's 7 or 8 years old. The Liquori in there is a mixture. So that's the barrel 2010. So that's whatever that is today. I don't know what year are we in.
12, 13.
Yes.
13, yeah.
And there's some 2011. The sherry hogshead, the one sherry hogshead that's going into that batch is 2011. Sherry, the sherry is the oldest because even the Kalila is from 2011. And the bourbon has some 2016, 2014, 2015, 2016 Kalila in it. Which, to be fair, is my favorite part of it. It's and probably the most interesting cask bit because these are bourbon barrels. They were used in the production of bourbon, but they were toasted and charred. So they came from Kelvin Cooperage. Kelvin they're one of the few cooperages who toast their wood before they char it. For bourbon production, they're not massive. Like they're not like an independent stave or they're not a huge cooperage, but they do make fresh barrels for the bourbon industry. But specifically, like brands you might have heard of that use their barrels specifically, Michter's, Peerless.
Yeah, Michter's, okay.
They all buy toasted and charred barrels. The reason they buy them is because you get better interaction in the wood, so you get a softer whiskey, basically softer, sweeter whiskey. So I went to Kelvin and I said, is there any chance I could buy your wood that's been used for bourbon? They thought I was mental. But luckily Brittany's really nice and she does sort it out. I don't get much, like I get like a dozen barrels or something, because it's, you're talking about small production, so it's going to small distillery, like a small producer like Peerless, and it's coming back in. But we keep that and we use a percentage of that for Elements of Islay to give us that slightly richer interaction.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's great. That's very cool. Sam, you had another question?
Yeah, I had a question and a half. Let's start with a half, which is a rhetorical question. Ollie, you now, like altitude and latitude would be somewhere in a place where we can expect elements of Speyside now added to Elements of Islay?
You know what? I've got my work cut out with just the one distillery, Sam. So I'm going
You have a trading power. You can,
Yeah.
offer 25 casks of Tormore for one 25-year-old Glen Grant, and there we go. The marriage is right there.
if that works, but sadly, I don't think it will.
The question I had was, existing range using the bourbon casks, and could be bourbon barrels, and now we learned it could be bourbon barrels that added some staves and becomes, hogshead, or the sherry casks that would be, hogsheads, butts, puncheons, barrique, you name it, PX, Oloroso. So it's still kind of traditional bourbon and sherry that you use. Are there anything in pipeline that would be matured in? Joshua mentioned Saturn.
Oh, I love
go
my
with
Sauterne, Sam.
Mezcal, tequila, port, Madeira, on and on.
We have some Islay stock sitting in other cask types, not many. I am, by my very nature, conservative, small c. That doesn't mean anything to anyone in the States, but it means something quite important to me. But some of those things, like for instance, I've got some Kalila and rum, some of which we bottled for you guys. It's not massively rum infused either, so it's not like heavy. And I'm not looking at it in Elements of Islay currently. We've started doing some trials with other spirit, with Tormore, on sweet wines, on Madeira particularly, and a few other things. But
Nice.
It's more a case of you kind of try stuff, but the answer is, Sam, you don't know until you get to the point where you're going to bottle it, because we're still learning. Like when certainly I am a master of, like I made the joke before we started, jack of all trades, master of none. Absolutely master of absolutely nothing. We are still learning every day, still studying, still asking questions. So you try stuff, but you try it. I never put something into word and go, this will be this, because I'm not experienced enough to know that's going to work. So
I would argue that there's still a lot of variables too, just like what we were talking about earlier in terms of recipe and what you expect. Like there's still so many variables that go into that, filling levels, ABVs, how juicy that wood already is, how many times it's been used before. I mean, there's a lot of things you'd expect, and then you go, that didn't happen.
Yeah. So the answer is probably, maybe, but we won't know until we get there, which I fully accept is really annoying for everyone who's not me, because everyone else wants to plan out their next 5 years, and I'm sitting there going, yeah, I'm making some stuff up. Deal with it when I get to the end.
Sales would like a little bit more knowledge on what's happening, Ollie. I'll speak for the rest of the team, Lily and me.
A bit like you guys at ImpEx. We're a liquid-driven business, and that has its benefits from a personal point of view, but it has its challenges, because if you weren't a liquid-driven business, you could run a marketing plan and you just bottle stuff and hope it tasted right? But that's what we do, is we make stuff and then we ask someone to figure out how they're going to sell it, which is completely the wrong way around. But it's a much tastier thing.
I still feel we're privileged by, like, when we bring single casks from you, we taste them first, and sometimes it's hard to say no, but I know you always take it as a real, coming from the experts of the market. Not, we don't question your ability of bringing something that is great, but sometimes so. And then, Chanel gives us nice surprise when we bring the whole team to Islay. We find some cute, sample sets. I mean, that's all, makes us very proud. And we're now in 10 states with Elements of Islay, which is great for the start. We just brought it in. It's just first kind of. So yeah, and to your last comment about OC on the bottle, LN, you were able to determine the ppm. I think it was 50 on LN2.
I think it was in the paperwork for that. So LN was a funny one because we bought the casks from, we bought them privately from, interestingly, our importer in the Netherlands. Yeah, but it goes back to the beginning, right? So as I said, when we started Elements of Islay, it was a bunch of friends, and a lot of those people are still friends today, and most of them were just whiskey enthusiasts. So it's Hans and Auke, who are just pals who started a company in the Netherlands, and they're pretty mental. They drive fast cars, and they're nuts. But well worth a visit, by the way. Great guys, great fun. They'd gone to Ireland and they just bought casks of Lockendal because they thought it was interesting, because they were interested in whiskey, not to import it because they had no plan to do so. In fact, they got to the point of being like, well, we need to do something with this whiskey. So you'd think a whiskey importer would know what to do, but what they did instead was phone me and said, do you want these? I think LN1, I actually sold half of it back to them. So I'm like, you realize this is something we're really trying. We're all just sharing it. I do kind of miss. I mean, in some ways, I miss those days where it felt a lot smaller. But the flip side of that, and I know something you guys are going through with you've got loads of new distilleries coming on into the ImpEx collection, lots of I mean new Ardnamurchan and Rassi, etc. The nice thing is that we get to expand the category and bring more people in our weird and incredibly friendly, if not a bit odd world.
Yeah.
So just to confirm, Mark Rene has nothing to do with this LN2, right?
No, not really. I think at that time I don't know what stage it did.
I was trying to see like Broccoli and Octomore and Lockendal and Port Charlotte.
We used to sell so much independent stuff. You used to get offered quite a bit, like a Cask every now and again, Port Charlottes and stuff. Most of the directors at Broccoli have stock, and they used to sell it to us to pay for their kids to go to school.
That's great.
If there wasn't free education in the UK, I think we were doing them a service, but obviously they could have done in a comprehensive system. Politics.
Can't help himself.
I wanted to get us out here on actually a comment that came in that I thought really speaks to what Elixir Distillers does as a business and what I think you do successfully from bottling to bottling, and that is to cherish the variation and celebrate the uncertainty. I like that a lot.
I saw that come in. That's awesome. It's probably true for life, to be honest.
Yeah,
Mark.
that's true. That's true. But Ali, Chanel, thank you so much. The comments kept coming in one after another, thanking you both for your time and all of your insight. It's always a joy speaking with you and drinking along with you is lovely. And Sam, I loved your questions. Thank you for everything, for being my partner in crime on these events. That's all I had to say. If Sam, Chanel, Ali, if you wanted any closing words.
I just want to say that the best thing for me is that I have not missed Chris at all. That's where you can tell him he's not needed, right? That's just.
I can't edit that part out. He's gonna hear it. He's gonna go red in the face.
Well, if
red in the hair, red in the face.
You'd feel embarrassed.
I talked to him today probably 4 or 5 times, about 1.5 hours to the total, and he did say thank you. I'm gonna put him in a nice room. he did say
Aw.
thank you and it said hi. And Joshua, thank you for putting this together. That was great. I know you're still alive. That's all I need. But Chanel, thank you for helping us with marketing and with. Now I know you're part of this selection, so I'm gonna be proud to say that to many people. Ollie, continue your crazy experiments. Continue being crazy because we love this crazy Ollie, who always surprises us with something that what it is going on. But then at the end of the day, you're right. I hate to say that, but yeah. But I also wanted to thank everyone who joined us today for your support and for your questions and
Thank you,
comments.
everybody.
We love you. We love you. We love you.
Thank you, everybody. I think it's probably because I'm here in New Zealand, but there's an amazing proverb that comes out more often than not, especially in the whiskey industry, which is, what is the most important thing in the world? It is the people. It is the people. It is the people. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, wow. That's really nice. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers.